everybody, I'm Kate Cass, and welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about Danny Phantom a bit more. Looking back during that last video, Danny Phantom has developed an interesting legacy. Ask around and it's either an underrated gem that Nickelodeon cut down too soon, or an overhyped mess clouded by nostalgia goggles. Not to mention all the controversy with its creator, which I'm not even touching. There are tons of videos about that stuff from far more successful creators than me. I don't feel it's super relevant to go into. But something that I think can be agreed on is that Danny Phantom had a lot of unfulfilled potential. The show's got a strong premise and cool characters. There was a lot of room for it to grow that many would argue it did not have the time or ability to reach. A continuation has been in high demand practically since before the series finale of Phantom Planet aired, and after how divisive and controversial said finale was, that demand only got higher. People wanted more, another chance to see what Danny Phantom could do at its best, and that demand never really went away. Danny Phantom has a very healthy fan community despite it being off the air for over 15 years. With that kind of audience primed and ready for more, and with how much companies and studios love reviving old properties, I've been kind of bemused that Danny Phantom never got that treatment. That was until September 2022, when out of nowhere, this dropped.
Oh my...
I cannot begin to articulate to you how utterly stunned I was to see this. I had to triple check the announcement and the sources that were covering it to make sure it wasn't a really convincing piece of fan art. It didn't feel real. I mean, just look at this cover. This felt like a tease to the ultimate Danny Phantom wish fulfillment story. There's no way. But no, it was real. Danny Phantom was coming back in graphic novel form.
Hey, I never approved of this!
I talked about this when I talked about the Gravity Falls graphic novel, Lost Legends, but comics can be a great middle ground to give more stories to TV shows that are more financially reasonable. It doesn't have the scale of a full animated project, but it also doesn't have some of their restrictions. There's a bit more freedom when telling a story in a comic versus a TV show. With Danny Phantom's inspirations being rooted in comics and its cult classic status being demanding enough for a revival, but maybe not enough for another full season of television, this felt like the perfect compromise, and I couldn't wait to read it. But I had to, because the announcement was made like a year before it would be released. When I tell you that wait was agonizing, I mean it. So, what does this new Danny Phantom story have to offer? Did it match expectations nearly 15 years in the making? Let's find out. It seems like Danny is thriving in his happily ever after as a world-renowned hero, with Amity Park being more prepared to face the threat of ghosts than ever before. But things aren't what they appear. Danny is struggling with his new normal. Vlad returns to try and reclaim the glory he lost, which results in the release of Dark Danny, or Phantom. With Clockwork gone and the greatest threat they've ever faced on the loose again, Danny must rally the troops together to search for a means to save the present and discover some important things along the way. Before we get into the meat of the story, let's go over the presentation. How well does Danny Phantom translate into a comic? As I suspected, very well. I still can't believe Danny Phantom comics weren't a thing until now. The closest we ever got were some occasional comic strips in Nick magazine. But this isn't just a typical comic, it's a nearly 200-page graphic novel. Written and illustrated by Gabriella Epstein, who is most well known for some graphic novel adaptations of The Babysitter's Club, an award-winning bilingual graphic novel, Invisible, and has even worked with Nickelodeon before on the Kid Danger animated series. She's also got an amazing portfolio, by the way. Like, scroll through her website if you have some time to kill. You can even open another tab and listen to this video in the back for a bit. I won't be offended. Her work is that good. Epstein's style is reminiscent enough to the show to make the characters and environments recognizable, but doesn't restrict itself to staying true to the show stylistically. The posing and artwork is just so lively, the use of pauses in the paneling is great for both comedic and dramatic moments, the expressions can be more exaggerated than they ever were on the show, but to marvelous effect. These facial expressions are just so funny. It's definitely compensating for the lack of movement and voice acting that you're used to from Danny Phantom, but it does so amazingly. That's to say nothing of the action. There aren't too many action scenes before the final battle, but what's there is really fun. Especially with all these glitches in time, with incredibly effective scenes where reality warps and the world around them gets distorted without warning. It's very effective at getting the point across that everything is falling apart, and this is taking everything our heroes have to hold things together. You can practically hear the distortion in the air. My only complaint with the artwork is that Clockwork doesn't shift between ages like he does on the show. That was disappointing disappointing and feels like a key detail missing, but I admit it's a nitpick at best. The dedicated fan in me had to mention it though, I'm sure you understand. This is such a fun book to look at, bringing Danny Phantom to a whole new medium while adjusting the style to work better in that format. Nothing feels flat or out of place in the artwork. Epstein's artwork and the coloring by Killian Ing brings the story to life in a way where it both feels like a traditional episode of the show and something all its own. So let's talk a bit more about the story. Glitch in Time takes place a few months after the series ended. The events of Phantom Planet have changed things in Amity Park pretty drastically. Danny is a world-renowned hero and doesn't have to hide anymore, so the threat of ghosts is taken more seriously and others want to help out. The look we get into Danny's new normal is interesting, if unusual. It is nice to see Danny be celebrated by the city and his classmates after being an outcast for so long, but I don't know how much I buy that they'd all sign up to be a part of the town's ghost hunting squad, which seems very irresponsible on the town's part because not only are they children, they are these children. But even though things seem to be going perfectly for Danny, he can't help but feel lost. He's admired, but it feels hollow. His powers even start to fade. This is the main drive of the story. Danny should be fulfilled in his happily ever after, but he still feels lost and everything feels off. The book even opens with these new glitches in time affecting Danny so much that he starts questioning if the events surrounding the disasteroid even happened. Believe me, kid, you're not the only one. On the bright side, turns out Tucker's mayoral run ended as quickly as it began, and now he's an influencer, which makes too much sense. Hey, as long as this resort to doing cameos, he'll still have more cred than some other politicians. Speaking of politicians, look who's back! Yes, Vlad Plasmius has phased his way back into Danny's life, which was quite a shock. I didn't mention this in the last video, but the last time we saw Vlad, he's stranded out in space, and then is crushed by an asteroid, leading some people to believe he was killed off in the very last moments of the show. I do get why people drew that conclusion, but I never thought he was dead. I just think it was a confusing and poor attempt at slapstick. Regardless, he's back. And it is such an effective, downright dreaded return. Battered, despondent, and begging Danny for help. It's an interesting sight to me because we know Vlad burned every bridge he built during the disasteroid event. He lost everything trying to gain everything. But there's something about him actually going back, seeing for himself that he truly has nothing to return to, resorting to trying to regain his advantage by going to Clockwork and making things worse again, that really left an impact on me. He has no power, no influence, barely a home, just the spectral cloak on his back. Seeing such a powerful villain at their absolute lowest, with nothing and no one to turn to besides our heroes. This and Danny's struggles represent something A Glitch in Time does so well, builds on and follows up on the events of Phantom Planet. I kinda can't stand this mindset some viewers and even creators have to completely reverse or do away with a major development they didn't like in a story.
Well, there was that gas leak last year.
Oh, don't blame it all on a gas leak year.
To me, it's much more rewarding to accept those things happened and build something stronger from them. That is exactly what Glitch in Time does, as Danny sets out with Sam, Tucker, and a reluctantly recruited Vlad to find what can hopefully make Danny strong enough to take on Phantom. We're gonna mainly save discussion on Phantom for later, because until the final battle, he mostly serves as an impending threat, but like in his debut episode, one that's treated with the weight and gravitas it deserves. His return is an immediate reminder of how powerful and menacing he is. With the added motive for revenge and plenty of time to plot during his captivity, Phantom is even more of a threat than before. Within moments, he takes out Clockwork and steals his power of control over time for himself, with a new look to go with it that I thought was a bit much at first, but I got used to it. From that point on, he becomes a literal ticking time bomb. Despite Amity Park being so well protected against ghosts, he decimates the city in a matter of minutes. And even with his focus being on Amity Park, the effects of his merging with Clockwork are messing with Danny's group as well. Phantom's interference with the Ghost Master of Time is causing the aforementioned glitches and fractures in the timeline, randomly warping Danny and the others through different points in history. It's a pretty cool addition to the story. Not only is it a disconcerting obstacle with how suddenly it comes on and how it's used as the first sign that something is wrong that persists throughout the story, but it adds some extra obstacles to a story that could have just been 100 pages for a fetch quest. Plus, it's an excuse to dress up the characters in new costumes, and that's always fun to me. It became something I anticipated the more these time jumps happened, but the majority of the book is still a fetch quest, which gives us one of my favorite aspects of the book, Team Phantom's alliance of convenience with Vlad. The gang needing to reluctantly team up with Plasmia is something I'm shocked never properly happened on the show. There were a couple of soft instances of this, like in Rainstorm or Torrent of Terror, but never a full-on mission together. And that's a shame, because Glitch in Time proves just how entertaining it is. The book already captures the show's style of humor and banter really well. There are some very funny moments, but for me, most of them come from the kids dragging Vlad along on this mission, leading to many humiliating and exacerbated moments from both sides. Stuff like Sam questioning Vlad's spending habits and Tucker unknowingly calling out his research methods are so hilarious. Also, shout out to Peartech. Don't think that was ever on the show before, but it's a Nickelodeon TV staple, so nice touch, guys. The main quest is them helping Vlad search for the original source of all ghost energy, hoping that can restore Danny's powers so he can take on Phantom. A quest that goes pretty smoothly with Team Phantom now working on it. Between all the team members' unique viewpoints, they're able to decipher in a matter of hours what Vlad hasn't been able to crack in nearly a decade. It is very funny. I mean, look at that face. But also telling. While Danny has been enhancing his abilities and learning to be more resourceful over the last few years he's been a ghost, Vlad's been relying on the same old tricks, and that's why he never cracked the code. But between Tucker's tech savvy, Sam's outsider thinking, and Danny's resourcefulness and empathetic look at the lives of ghosts, they get through each individual obstacle pretty smoothly and visit some familiar history in the process. Something that's really fun about this mission is that it's laced with callbacks to the original series. Like I said, the main quest was put in motion by Vlad's mission to obtain the ultimate power in the Ghost Zone. Vlad seeking some kind of ancient ultimate power connected to ghosts was a major part of the show for a while that they kinda dropped. I think we were led to believe he was searching for Pariah's Keep, but there were hints that that was just one of many endeavors for power. There's also the fact that Phantom is the main villain, they bring in Valerie and her complicated antithesis towards ghosts, and the search for said power mentions the 7 ancient ghost guardians and even takes them back to the most hidden secrets in Pariah's Keep. There's a lot of work put into weaving things from the show's history naturally into the narrative, exploring some of that potential with the world that the show either wasn't able to or wasn't interested in doing. It feels much more like a finale than Phantom Planet did, honestly. The writing does a really good job at revisiting or expanding on material from the show, while filling in some potential plot holes in a way that doesn't feel like it's lifting more of a burden than it needs to. My only complaint is that the Fright Knight shows up, and his alliance with Vlad was apparently broken off-screen somewhere. That was a bit of a bummer. But I do really love how they portrayed Danny and Sam's relationship as a couple. There's not a lot of kissing or anything, but they are very affectionate and supportive towards each other. It's there, like they're definitely still together, but not in your face. I really liked how they went about that. That, and it's really cute. But eventually, they do reach this fabled power, the source of all ghost energy, the Ghost Zone's greatest secret. This is where things get a bit more existential, because this source the gang have been searching for is not a weapon or an increase in power, it's knowledge. Ancient texts saying that the source of all ghost energy comes from a divide between the worlds of the living and the dead, ghosts being a personification of incorporeal things that can be manifested in the human world, like spirit and emotion. And understanding that is the true key to bringing harmony between these long divided worlds.
I love it when the mythology gets expanded.
Now, this is a lot to take in. It does change the way we view the Ghost Zone and the ghosts themselves in Danny Phantom, and it's a pretty bold addition to the world to drop in here. It was a big risk to include this. But I do think this lines up rather well with what we already know about the relationship between humans and ghosts, or lack thereof. Let's compartmentalize here. Ghosts being physical manifestations of strong human emotions and desires actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Each ghost in Danny's Rose Gallery is representative of something like this. Feeding on those same emotions is a lifeblood that gives a lot of these hosts power. True, this isn't a hard rule, tons of ghosts on the show don't need the emotional substance of humans to thrive, but they all have a desire that practically consumes them. It plays on that typical piece of mythology that ghosts only hang around the land of the living for a reason. Something strong that motivates their actions, and they won't stop until it's satisfied. Like Skulker being a hunter who wants the ultimate prize, Technus's insatiable desire to be one with the most advanced of technology, Walker's dedication to upholding law and order, even the boss ghost's obsession with, well, boxes. All these things that started off as gimmicky traits used as obstacles for our heroes, in this context, can now be seen as an unquenchable desire driving every ghost we've come across. Which also includes a few ghosts who are just straight up dead people like Sidney Poindexter and Desiree. That accounts for the more personified ghosts, but there are also ones that are more animalistic or abstract. Believe it or not, this explanation accounts for that as well. They're simply spirits who lost whatever human identity they were attached to and became more monstrous. That one's brilliant on another level because it's a good explanation for the radical change in the approach to ghosts in season 3. All these freakier ghosts were hanging around the vast corners of the ghost zone and just ganged up on Amity Park at the same time. That's my headcanon now. This well thought out retcon is something they've helpfully been emphasizing in the gang's antics through time. Again, it was more than just a fun gimmick. A lot of the ghosts who appear to be intimidating and obsessed were just reaching out in the only way they knew how. But once Danny was able to understand them and act accordingly, things were resolved peacefully. And that is where the true epiphany lies. With Danny. All this time, Danny has been trying to keep ghosts away from Amity Park, keeping the human and ghost worlds as separate as he can in an attempt to keep the peace, unintentionally increasing this rift between worlds we now know there is. Danny is a unique creature that belongs to both worlds, who has now been tasked with what to do with this knowledge about this unnatural divide. This might feel like it's giving Danny another burden, but it does help with this feeling of being lost he's been struggling with. The fact that a ghost's power is intrinsically tied to their emotionally driven purpose can just as easily apply to half-us like Danny and Vlad. With Danny, his powers have been diminishing lately because he hasn't felt the sense of urgency to protect the ones he loves that he's felt ever since he got his powers. Since the Disasteroid, the townspeople have been able to fend off ghosts just fine. Even with the larger threat of Phantom on the horizon, that's not gonna renew his power either. They realize that just fighting ghosts doesn't make sense anymore with what they've now learned. Danny got stronger over time from the driving purpose of protecting those he loved from an outside evil. Now, given the chance to really think about what it means to be a human and a ghost, he sets out on a new path, heading back to Amity Park to take on Phantom, returning with a fun Ultimate Enemy callback.
Guess who's back and better than ever?
Knowing what he knows now, Danny tries to end the conflict with Phantom peacefully, really only fighting to keep him from causing more damage than he already has. Which, side note, can we take a minute to acknowledge the fact that Phantom reduced Amity Park to near ruin just to draw Danny out to fight? That is a new level of spitefulness. This final battle does force us to get to the root of what Phantom is. Not just what Danny could become at his lowest, but also the destructive aspirations of another. Vlad. It's true the dominant part of Phantom is that alternate version of Danny, but I really love how this book, and especially this final fight, reminds us how much he is also a part of Vlad. Not just being fused with his more evil, more powerful ghost half, but the direct hand Vlad had in creating Phantom in the first place. Suddenly, Phantom becomes not just a cautionary tale for Danny, but for Vlad, a physical embodiment of what his destructive quest for ultimate power could really look like. And seeing what that's wrought shakes Vlad to his very core. Like Danny, Vlad is forced a lot in this book to examine his choices and reconsider his self-proclaimed purpose. Glitch in Time takes a good, hard look at Danny's famous arch-nemesis and takes him in an interesting, if unexpected, direction, giving him a chance to redeem himself. It's interesting because this is something that a lot of people in the fanbase have speculated about and wanted to see. There's no shortage of fanworks of Vlad seeing the error of his ways and working to make amends with the Fentons. But it's unexpected because it could be argued he really doesn't deserve it. Vlad Masters is as despicable as they come. He's guilty of theft, abuse of power, extortion, kidnapping, unethical experimentation, attempted murder, election fraud, sexual harassment, beating up children on multiple occasions, and just straight up being a creepy Fruit Loop.
I am not a Fruit Loop!
Oh, okay. Denial.
Every advantage he's managed to gain in life, he's taken for his own purposes, and used his powers to take the most manipulative means to get what he wanted, whether he succeeded or not. So why is there this desire, by a decently sized portion of the fanbase, to see him redeemed? I think it comes down to the fact that there's a very obvious tragedy when it comes to Vlad. We're not given much context of Vlad's life after the portal accident, if Jack and Maddie kept their distance after what happened, or if Vlad pushed them away. But we're led to believe that the aftermath resulted in deep isolation, being in and out of the hospital for years and learning to control and keep his ghost half under wraps. Even in his most difficult times as a half-ghost, Danny always had a support system. Vlad had no one. Were Danny getting his powers powers made him more outgoing, Vlad's made him more secluded, partially due to his immediate illness, but mostly through his own decisions, amassing massive amounts of power and wealth to obtain as much control of the world around him as possible after this very unpredictable thing happened to him.
And I am not a villain. All I wanted was love.
I believe him when he says that. But instead of putting in the work and taking the risk to forge meaningful relationships, he decided to craft a life for himself where he could be in complete control, never hurt again by anyone. When outside interference got too unpredictable or wouldn't conform to what he wanted, he'd seek vengeance or straight up replace them. The Maddie hologram, those clones of Danny, which he still has apparently. Again, too big of a can of worms. He's a multi-billionaire who doesn't even have an in-house staff. There's a sense of domination to Vlad, that he has the power to control any scenario put in front of him, yet a futility that what he really wants, he can never have. Maddie's affection, Danny's approval, Jack's demise, the Green Bay Packers.
Why don't you just buy the team?
Because the Packers are owned by the city of Green Bay and they won't sell them to me.
At his core, Vlad is a very lonely guy, and that loneliness has driven all of his actions in the series. It's tough to ascertain what exactly Vlad's end goal was as a villain. It was mainly just to acquire more power with no end in sight. I mean, you could argue trying to figure that out was made difficult by the conflicting approaches with writing Vlad, but to take a more Watsonian approach, the idea that his quest for power was a quest to maintain control out of a fear of loss of control, again, makes a lot of sense. His villainy came from how far he went in this pursuit, taking advantage of and disposing of people he believed he was better than. When he goes to Clockwork in a feeble attempt to rebuild what he carelessly threw away, Clockwork points out that he has had plenty of chances to turn his life around and make better choices. And he's right. Like right there, for instance. Vlad could take the chance to see what his life would be like without his self-made kingdom, to take a hard look at the self-destructive nature of his choices. But he doesn't. He wants to force things to be the way he wants them to be again, and again, it only makes things worse.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
The moment where it finally becomes clear for him that this approach just doesn't work is when the true nature of the source comes to light. When it turns out to not be some sort of ultimate power that could give its user full control over both worlds, he has a complete meltdown. Vlad's whole goal all this time has been to obtain power. So when he truly has no power left and no power to seek out, that is when he's forced to examine his views and choices and maybe try something else. Like with Danny, the transformation of Vlad's change in purpose is pretty incredible. It doesn't absolve him of any of the downright despicable things he's done. In fact, it forces him to acknowledge them, wipe away his own delusions of grandeur and superiority, come to terms with what he's become, the fault he had in how things turned out, or could have turned out, using the power he has left as Plasmius to fight back, stand for the right things, and make a change. It's a truly amazing moment, one I absolutely did not expect, but feels so earned and cathartic, and having it result in Danny and Vlad truly teaming up to deliver the finishing blow is really cool. With that, they are able to successfully separate Phantom from Clockwork. Now battered and defeated, we're left with the important question. What happens to Phantom now? Well, with what we've learned about what really drives a ghost, even a half-ghost, instead of sealing Phantom away again, Danny, and by extension, the reader, are left to get to the root of what drives Phantom. Through this whole ordeal, Phantom has dismissed or scoffed at any attempts to reason with him or talk him out of his mindless destruction, claiming he's above being motivated by any emotional cause. Remember, the reason Phantom was created in the first place was because the Danny who lost everyone he loved wanted to remove himself from these human feelings of sorrow and grief. We're led to believe then that Phantom is a creature incapable of deeper emotion, cold, malicious, and unfeeling like you'd think a pure ghost would be. That's how he came across in The Ultimate Enemy, causing destruction not because he had any larger purpose in doing so, but just because he could. That's part of what made him so terrifying. In Glitch in Time, however, Phantom is much more vocal about his motivations this time, possibly due to having the first break in his violent rampage in over a decade. Now he wants revenge for imprisoning him and taking away his future. This is our first contradiction in Phantom's facade, because revenge is always emotionally motivated by betrayal and loss. Fittingly, Jazz is the first one who tries to reason with him. She sees that he's still hurt from his past losses, even if he's convinced himself that the one destruction of a ghost is more satisfying. Jazz tries to talk to him as his sister, power, and is the first to ask why he's targeting the Fentons, why he wants to destroy it all, if he's so above human feelings. A contradiction he's confronted with by both Danny and Vlad in the final fight. It's not until he's defeated that Phantom finally breaks down, admitting, in few words, that all of this has been trying to reclaim a victory of his own, filling the void left behind by what he lost, and relying on angry destruction because dwelling on anything else would be too painful. That's his drive. If you defeat everyone, you can't lose anything ever again. But Danny and the others defeating him puts him on the side of loss again. His interference with time even results in his body becoming unstable. It's pretty powerful stuff. Phantom's defeat was so instant and ultimate enemy that we never got to dwell on it. But seeing this terrifying reflection of Danny's darker impulses, crestfallen and reduced to that scared, lost kid, it's unexpected but handled really well. He's not a weeping mess, he's still bitter and angry. We all wanted to see what would happen if Phantom returned, and what we got was him at both his most powerful and most vulnerable, with truly nothing left to lose but his very sense of self, and his very being is about to be lost forever. Until, in yet another unexpected move, Vlad steps in. For the first time, he reaches out to someone he's hurt and tries to make things right, offering to be an anchor for Phantom in this timeline. It's the cherry on top Vlad's arc in this book needed to feel truly satisfying, an unforeseen moment of self-sacrifice and empathy that even surprises the ghosts who can see all possible timelines. Mind you, I don't think Vlad or Phantom are completely reformed by any stretch, but this is definitely a step in the right direction and fills a void in both of their very lonely lives. Vlad gets a chance to do something good, Phantom gets another chance to grow up, giving both of them a chance to get what they never had. A family.
Maybe that's all anybody needs. A second chance.
Come to think of it, that could sum up the entirety of Glitch in Time, with a particularly interesting angle taken with Danny. This changes his outlook entirely. He's matured in many ways since becoming Danny Phantom, but this might be one of the most triumphant adventures he's ever had. There was an unsatisfied void inside him, and he needed to find what would fill it. Learning more about who and what he is, and applying that knowledge in a constructive way, is what finally sets him on a better path. Danny is no longer an outlier that doesn't fully belong as a human or a ghost. He represents the true harmony that is meant to exist between the two worlds. As a being who belongs to both worlds, with this new outlook guiding him, he wants to help heal the divide and bridge the gap between humans and ghosts forged long ago. But in true Danny Phantom fashion, not without sacrifice. When repairing the damage Phantom did to the time stream, Clockwork gives Danny a choice: to return to a time where he'll no longer have his powers, or where he's a pariah yet again, erased as the hero who saved the world from the disasteroid.
Nope. Don't like that.
Yeah, not gonna lie, this is the one part of the book I didn't like. Emotionally, it's pretty strong. Danny gladly takes on the responsibility of being a representative of both worlds at the cost of his fame. And when you compare this to Danny's actions in Phantom Planet, it becomes even stronger. There, Danny wanted to give up his powers because he thought it'd be for the best. But he realized he was unfulfilled without them, and once he becomes Danny Phantom again, the first thing he does is lead a mission to unite humans and ghosts in a common goal. To take that and build a new arc for Danny from it when given the choice to decide what he wants to be again, that demonstrates how much more confident and assured he's become with his identity, is really creative and does feel natural and satisfying. But it also came off to me as an excuse to erase a part of Phantom Planet, which really bothers me. It feels like reverting to a more familiar status quo that the book has actively been avoiding this whole time. I get that it's meant to be another challenge in Danny's new mission, but I think it would have been just as tough to convince humans and ghosts to live peacefully if he was still a recognized hero. Maybe even have him put his reputation on the line to stand for those beliefs. That could have been interesting. But no. Press the reset button. I mean, for God's sakes, couldn't we have at least kept it so his parents got to know his secret identity? They may have mostly been in the background, but it was so nice to see Jack and Maddie act as backup for Danny. But now we're back to them wanting to tear him apart molecule by molecule. This is like the third time they found out and forgotten. I'm so sick of this. It's a choice that doesn't sour the story by any stretch, but as of right now, feels unnecessary. But let's just say, not everyone in Amity Park is so forgetful. Despite my issues with the ending, it does feel triumphant as we hit the final pages, with Dan and the others racing off to stop some familiar ghosts from wreaking havoc with a new lease on life. After all, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Overall, Danny Phantom, A Glitch in Time might be my new favorite Danny Phantom story. It's just so well put together. Even confined to paper and ink, this might be the biggest, most ambitious story told with our resident Ghost Boy. It honors the legacy of the series it originates from, while taking its world and characters in exciting and daring new directions. It's funny, action-packed, thought-provoking, and emotionally powerful. A welcome return to the familiar world of Danny Phantom that takes the opportunity to revisit this franchise to do some really ambitious things. It truly feels like Danny Phantom for the 2020s, extracting so much of Danny Phantom's untapped potential to deliver something that can not only match up to anything the show itself has done, but in some areas, many more than I expected when I first read this, it surpasses it. Yes, I don't love the ending. I'm not often a fan of reverting back to a status quo because of a controversial change, especially when Glitch in Time did an excellent job before then building on the aftermath of a lesser story and making it something much better by actually exploring the implications of Phantom Planet. But with how exceptional the rest of this graphic novel was, it fills me with confidence even in my hesitation. Gabriella Epstein knows how to represent this world and the characters well, and if this is the direction she wants to go, I'm sure wherever that leads will be just as excellent as what came before. The wait for more Danny Phantom stories was absolutely worth it if this was the end results. Like I said in the last video, Danny Phantom is my favorite superhero. I've always loved the guy and looked back fondly on the show, but Glitch in Time reignited that love with a fiery inferno, not just reminding me of what I loved in the past, but showing me what it could be capable of depicting in the present and possibly the future. Fitting for a time travel story, I suppose. A Glitch in Time is absolutely wonderful. I commend everyone involved with it for making it, and I was over the moon when I learned there was another volume on the way. Glitch in Time would have been just as good as an extended epilogue, but the idea that this is just the beginning of an ongoing continuation, I couldn't have asked for more. I can't wait to see where this all goes next. But I'm gonna have to, because it doesn't come out until next year. Such is the price of quality. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what you thought of A Glitch in Time in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including Jinx Productions and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.